Art Beyond Time.
Exploring art's impact.
Hello, we are Irene from Spain.
And Olena from Ukraine.
We are from AUM and Tebus associations here in Sisoara and Saskis. And welcome to the Art Beyond Time Exploring Art's Impact podcast. We will dive into the world of cinema and exploring its influence on society. And we'll also talk about the life and art of Ukrainian painter Katerina Bilokur. And we will also have a little surprise. First, we will dive into the world of cinema and the impact of it in society. Movies have had a significant influence on society and culture, and they're a way of telling stories that allow people to experience emotions, explore different cultures, and understand diverse perspectives. Firstly, cinema is a powerful tool to share values and messages. It can also impact how society views and understands certain topics through the portrayal of characters, stories, themes, and movies. For instance, a film can address important social issues such as equality, diversity, or justice and provoke conversations in society. Moreover, cinema also plays a role in cultural identity. Films can show the history, traditions, values, concerns, social and political realities of a period, and the evolution of mentalities in communities at the time that they are made. And of course, movies are also entertainment. And movies continue to have a significant impact on how we understand and relate to the world around us. In my country, the evolution of cinema has reflected and shaped social changes over time, becoming a powerful medium for storytelling and reflecting cultural identity. For example, La Lengua de las Mariposas, Butterfly's Tongue, explores social and political tensions through the relationship between a teacher and his students during the Second Spanish Republic. Another film, Bienvenido Mr. Marshall, Welcome Mr. Marshall, is a satire that focuses on the relationship between Spain and the US in the 1950s, criticizing cultural stereotypes and humorously portraying the opening up of Franco's regime to the outside world. And a fun example that also shows the impact of cinema in our lives is what happened after the release of La Cabina, the telephone box, which is a film that came out in the 1972, and the protagonist gets trapped in a telephone booth, and many unexpected things happen to him. And following its release, the movie created a social phenomenon where people developed a fear of getting stuck in a telephone booth, leading individuals to avoid them, or if they had to use them, they didn't close the doors. And now, Olena, you're going to tell us a bit about the Ukrainian painter Katerina Bilokur.
Yes, thank you, Irene. Thank you for sharing your view on the Spanish cinema. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about a prominent female figure in the Ukrainian art. Her name is Katerina Bilokur. She was born in 1900. She was a Ukrainian artist who taught herself to draw despite the opposition of her parents and her fellow villagers. She painted in the genre of naive art. And I believe that you need to understand the context of that time to see the real power of her art and its influence on the society. So I'm going to share some historic facts with our audience and with you, Irene. After forced collectivization and the Holodomor, which is a specific term meaning artificial famine inflicted on the Ukrainian villagers by the communists and Stalin. Those villagers didn't have passports. However, those passports could be obtained if the villager had a special certificate from the head of the collective farm. But those heads needed free labor to carry out the plans, so of course they didn't want to let people go to the city, even if they wanted to study. So these are the reasons why Katerina Bilokur didn't have a passport and she couldn't go anywhere. Nevertheless, she dreamed of escaping from the village where people didn't understand her. She dreamed of being closer to the environment of artists. And besides, she was a woman. And she was alone against the system, against the community, and even the family that didn't support her. In 1947, she was offered to paint a portrait of Stalin. And if he had liked the portrait, it would have opened all the doors to her. But the artist, having experienced all the horrors of the regime, of course refused. However, she had a moment of recognition in her life. In 1954, her paintings took part in the Paris exhibition. But she lived in the village until her death in 1961. So that's the story of Katerina Bilokur. And in the second part of our podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about our personal experience and the influence of art in our lives. So, Irene, would you like to share your perspective on it?
Yes, of course, and thank you for telling us the story of Katerina Bilokur. It was very, very interesting. So, for me, a film that impacted me a lot when I watched it for the first time was Schindler's List. I was old enough to watch it, but still young, and it was my first time seeing a story with so much brutality that I knew was based on real events. So some scenes were really shocking for me, and the film helped me understand more about a dark chapter in history. But I also liked seeing that even in the bad times, there are people who show humanity, and for that, young Irene was a bit more happy. I was also shocked by Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It talks about dark and mature topics such as discrimination, intolerance, and lust. And for me, it was surprising to see these more serious and complex topics in a Disney movie. And as a child, this film surprised me a lot, but I think I didn't fully understand the whole thing until I watched the movie again when I was older. And for me, it was nice to see more reality in a Disney movie. And for you, what was the art that influenced your life?
Well, we've been talking about some monumental works here, but I believe that art exists on different levels, so that's the beauty of it. It's not always like groundbreaking. It can be very personal and healing and even therapeutic, and of course entertaining, as you have mentioned before. And in this section, I'm gonna be talking mostly about music. I was about 7 years old when I listened to the second album named Discovery by Daft Punk. And I'm pretty sure that that experience set the course for my future music interests. And they were a French duo. They're not that, they just don't play anymore. So they were a French electronic music duo formed in 1993. And they achieved popularity as part of the French house movement. They combine elements of house music with funk, disco, techno, synth pop. Another example of a music album that has influenced my life is an album called Can't Hate Myself into a Different Shape by Brimheim. She is an artist from Faroe Islands. And this album really helped me on my way to self-acceptance when I was having quite a rough patch in my life. But also, having said that, I would like to mention another artistic experience. In 2021, I was visiting a friend in Istanbul, and he invited me to a protest against the election of the new rector. And apart the regular chanting and posters, they had beautiful artworks, paintings mocking that rector. They were even dancing there. And that experience really changed my personal perspective on art, because it showed that it can be utilized for quite practical and societal purposes. So yeah, that's it. However, as you have mentioned before, we have a surprise, and this is our lovely special guest, Anna. She was born in the US, but now she lives in the Canary Islands. So Anna, would you like to share an example of art changing history or society?
Of course I will. Thank you for having me on. I'm going to be discussing about American art specifically. The United States has had a prevalent culture in the artistic world and societal changes that have been associated with artistic liberation. A notable example of an individual who has achieved notoriety in American society is Keith Haring, a recognizable name in the world of art. He is synonymous with street art being of graffiti-esque stature. His works include simplistic shapes, bright colors, thick lines, and fun movement. Although this seemingly uplifting style is actually about his own personal perspective on morality and commentary on society during the 1980s, some topics that he touched upon are nuclear war, AIDS, capitalism, climate change, and segregation. His nonchalant approach to critics, along with his gleeful style of art, appealed to younger individuals, despite the backlash that his art was labeled as being too mainstream. He used this popularity to create awareness, especially around the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s, partly due to himself being diagnosed with it. His piece, Ignorance Equals Fear, refers to the challenges people face living with AIDS. He wanted to reach out to as many people as possible and to highlight the importance of education surrounding AIDS. This took away ignorance and fear from the AIDS epidemic in the country.
Thank you for sharing. And now I'm going to ask you another question, and that is, what art piece has influenced your life?
Alrighty. An artistic piece that has left an impression on me is Mitilius Ratus by Banksy. This is an admittedly odd choice, but I do have my reasonings. The piece consists of a taxidermy rat with military clothes on and a spray paint can next to him. The text behind the rat is the phrase, "Our time will come." It was snuck into the National History Museum in London in 2007. Why this piece is so profound to myself is not only the message against capitalism, militarism, and law enforcement, but the story behind Banksy's rats as a whole. As stated by Banksy himself, rats exist without anyone's permission. They are hated, hunted, and prosecuted. They live in a quiet desperation amongst the filth, and yet they are capable of bringing entire civilizations down to their knees. If you are dirty, insignificant, and unloved, then rats are the ultimate role model. I cannot simply choose just one rat out of the plethora of them that exists in his own works. They make Banksy's own social and political commentary personified and represents the outcast in human society. This is why I personally relate and respect these rats. They represent a part of the world that isn't heard from so often. Thank you guys for having me on to your wonderful podcast.
Thank you, Anna, for sharing your personal experience with art. And I think it's time to wrap it up. That was the first episode of Art Beyond Time, where we covered the influence of art in society and in our personal lives. You can find all the information about the art pieces that we have mentioned in the description to this podcast, and stay tuned for our future episodes and follow us on our YouTube channel. Put a thumbs up if you like this podcast, and see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.